Caste, The Origins of Our Discontents, by Isabel Wilkerson. Introduction. There's a black and white photograph, taken in Germany in 1936, that tells a story more powerful than most history books. It's a wide shot of a shipyard in Hamburg. Hundreds of workers stand shoulder to shoulder, their right arms thrust forward in the rigid Nazi salute. They are a sea of conformity, a single organism hailing their Führer. But if you look closely, really lean in, you can spot one man who is different. He stands in the middle of the crowd, surrounded by the stiff arms of his countrymen, and he is doing nothing. His own arms are folded tightly across his chest. His face is calm, but firm. He is the one man refusing to salute. The one man standing against the tide. Looking back now, we know he was the only person in that entire photograph who was on the right side of history. In that moment, surrounded by a nation under a spell, he was the only one who could see the truth. His name, it's believed, was August Landmesser. He was an ordinary worker who had fallen in love with a Jewish woman, and that simple act of love had opened his eyes. It allowed him to see past the propaganda that his friends and neighbors had so easily accepted. We'd all like to believe that if we were there, in that time and place, we would have been him. We'd like to believe we would have had the courage to fold our arms while everyone else saluted. But would we? What does it take to see the invisible currents that shape our world? What does it take to stand up when everyone else is going along? That is the question at the very heart of one of the most important books of our time, Caste, The Origins of Our Discontents. The author, Isabel Wilkerson, is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, and she has spent her life uncovering the hidden stories that define us. With this book, she has given us more than just a history lesson. She has handed us a new lens, a new way of seeing the invisible architecture that holds our society together. Today, I'm going to share the profound wisdom of this book with you. And I'll make you a promise: by the end of our time together, you won't just understand the divisions you see in the world around you. You will understand the hidden operating system that creates them. You will see the invisible script that we've all been handed, and you'll discover the power we have to write a new one. This isn't just a book summary, it's a new pair of eyes. Let's begin. Book summary. Have you ever felt like you're living in a very old house? You know the kind. It has beautiful bones, a strong frame, but over the years, things have started to go wrong. There are cracks in the foundation that have been patched over but never truly fixed. A strange bow in the ceiling that you try to ignore. A dampness in the basement after a storm. You didn't build the house. Your parents might not have built it either. But you live there now. And you know, deep down, that ignoring the problems won't make them go away. The cracks will spread. The foundation will weaken. And any further deterioration is on your hands. Isabel Wilkerson begins her monumental work, Caste, with this powerful idea: America is an old house. And for centuries, we've been living with a hidden structural problem that affects every single one of us. We just haven't had the right word for it. We talk about race. We talk about class. We talk about politics. But according to Wilkerson, these are just the surface-level symptoms, the bowed ceilings and the cracked plaster. The real issue, the faulty foundation that everything is built upon, is something much older and much deeper. It's called caste. Now, when you hear the word caste, you probably think of India. And for good reason. India has the world's most recognized and ancient caste system. But Wilkerson makes a breathtaking argument. The United States, too, is built on a caste system. A hidden one, an unspoken one, but a powerful one all the same. So what is a caste system? Imagine a long-running play that's been on stage for centuries. The moment you're born, you're handed a costume and a script. You're cast in a role, Some people are cast as the leads, the heroes of the story. They get the most lines, the best lighting, and everyone on stage knows they're in charge. Others are cast in supporting roles. And some are cast as the chorus, the nameless, faceless figures in the background, essential for the production but with no lines to speak. The costumes can never be taken off. They signal to everyone in the play what role you're supposed to play and where you belong on the stage. If you stick to the script, you're rewarded. If you veer from it, the other actors will quickly step in to put you back in your place. A caste system, Wilkerson says, is just like that. It's an artificial, fixed ranking of human value. It sets one group at the top, as the standard of humanity, and ranks everyone else beneath them. And in America, the primary signal of your rank, your costume in the play, is what we call race. Race, she explains, is the skin. Caste is the bones. Race is what we see, the physical traits that have been given arbitrary meaning over centuries. But caste is the invisible infrastructure, the subconscious code of instructions that tells us how to interact with one another. It's the grammar we learn without ever taking a class. We just know it. We feel it. This idea hit drive. Martin Luther King Jr. Like a bolt of lightning in 1959. He and his wife, Coretta, were visiting India, the land of his hero, Gandhi. He was a global figure, a Nobel Prize nominee who had dined with prime ministers. One day, he visited a school for children from India's lowest caste, the people once known as untouchables. The principal introduced him to the students. "Young people," he said, "I would like to present to you a fellow untouchable from the United States of America." King was stunned. He was shocked. Peeved, even. Him? An untouchable? But then he stopped. He thought about the 20 million black people in America, trapped in poverty, exiled in their own country. And in that moment of quiet reflection, it dawned on him. "Yes," he said to himself. "I am an untouchable, and every Negro in the United States of America is an untouchable." He realized that the land of the free had built a caste system, and he had been living inside of it his entire life. This was the invisible enemy he had been fighting all along. So how did this old house get built? Where did the cracks in our foundation begin? Wilkerson takes us back to late August of 1619, a year before the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock. A ship arrived in the colony of Virginia carrying, as the settler John Rolfe wrote, not anything but 20 and odd Negroes. At first, the lines weren't perfectly clear. Status was based more on religion, Christian versus heathen, than on skin color. European indentured servants worked alongside enslaved Africans. They were all in a tough spot. But over the next few decades, the colonists, hungry for a permanent, easily identifiable labor force, began to sharpen the lines. They made a series of decisions that would change the course of history. They decided that Christianity would no longer protect an African from lifetime enslavement. They passed a law in 1662 that broke with all English tradition. A child would now inherit the status of their mother, not their father. This single law meant that a slave owner could father children with an enslaved woman, and those children would be born into slavery, adding to his wealth. It turned the black womb into a profit center. Slowly, deliberately, the colonists fused all the different people from Europe, the English, the Irish, the Germans, into a new invention, the white race. And they defined it by what it was not, black. This created the bipolar caste system that would define America for the next 400 years. A dominant caste at the top, and a subordinate caste at the very bottom, serving as the foundation, the mudsill, upon which the entire house was built. And what was it like to live on that mudsill? Wilkerson is unflinching here. She argues that we do our country a great disservice when we dismiss slavery as just a sad, dark chapter. For 246 years, longer than the United States has been a free nation, slavery was the country. It was an American innovation, an extreme form of human bondage that had existed nowhere else in the world. For the first time in history, one group of people was ruled out of the human race and turned into property, into currency. They could be bred, mortgaged, whipped, raped, branded, sold away from their children, or tortured for an owner's amusement. They were denied the right to marry, to learn to read, or even to cry when their families were torn apart at the auction block. It was a living death passed down for 12 generations. It took a civil war, the deadliest in our history, to end the institution of slavery. But it did not end the caste system. The structure remained. And after a brief period of hope known as Reconstruction, the dominant caste reasserted its power with a vengeance. They devised a labyrinth of new laws, the Jim Crow system, to hold the newly freed people at the bottom. Into this pre-existing hierarchy, each new wave of immigrants arrived. People from Ireland, Italy, Poland, Russia, they came to America to escape their own hardships. But to be accepted, to become American, they had to learn how to become white, and becoming white meant distancing themselves from the people at the bottom. It meant learning the slurs, joining in the scorn, and proving they were worthy of being in the dominant caste by showing they knew who was beneath them. This, Wilkerson says, is the tragic play we've all been born into. We are the latest caste in a long-running drama. None of us chose our roles, but we live with them every day. So, how does a caste system, this invisible force, maintain its power for so long? Wilkerson identifies what she calls the 8 pillars of caste, the foundational beliefs that hold the entire structure up. And what's chilling is that these same pillars can be found in the caste system of India, in Nazi Germany, and in the United States. It's like they were all working from the same instruction manual. Let's walk through them, because this is where the hidden architecture becomes visible. Pillar number 1 is divine will and the laws of nature. Every caste system claims that the hierarchy is not man-made, but is the will of God or the natural order of things. In India, the ancient laws of Manu say that the different castes were created from different parts of the god Brahma's body, the Brahmin priests from his mouth, the warriors from his arms, the merchants from his thighs, and the Shudra laborers from his feet. Below them all were the untouchables, who were outside the system entirely. In America, the colonists turned to the Bible, to the story of Noah and his sons. They twisted the curse of Ham into a divine justification for enslaving people from Africa. They told themselves that God had ordained this hierarchy. Thomas Cobb, a defender of slavery, wrote that God had framed black people physically and mentally to fill the sphere in which they were thrown. When a system is seen as divinely ordered, challenging it feels like challenging God himself. The second pillar is heritability. Your rank is set at birth. You are born into your caste, and you remain there for life. Your children will inherit your caste, and their children after them. It's not about your talent, your character, or how hard you work. It's about the bloodline you were born into. This is the key difference between caste and class. Class can be changed. You can, through education or luck, move from a lower class to a higher one. But as Wilkerson says, if you can act your way out of it, then it is class, not caste. In America, even at the highest levels of achievement, caste follows you. She tells the story of the Oscar-winning actor Forrest Whitaker, a distinguished, wealthy man, walking into a gourmet deli in New York City. As he turned to leave without buying anything, an employee stopped him, accused him of shoplifting, and publicly frisked him in front of other customers. His fame and wealth couldn't protect him from the assumptions of his caste. As LeBron James once said, if you are an African American man or African American woman, you will always be that. This leads us to the third pillar, endogamy, or the control of marriage and mating. This is the firewall of any caste system. To keep the bloodlines pure, you must forbid marriage and intimacy across caste lines. For most of American history, this was brutally enforced. As early as 1691, Virginia outlawed marriage between blacks and whites. Eventually, 41 of the 50 states would make interracial marriage a crime. This wasn't just about personal preference, it was about power. By controlling who could legally create a family, the dominant caste blocked the chance for empathy. It made it far easier to see those in the lower caste as other, as not of your kind. The punishment for breaching this pillar was often death. Wilkerson tells the heartbreaking story of Willie James Howard, a 15-year-old boy in Florida in 1944. He had a crush on a white girl he worked with at a dime store and sent her a sweet, innocent Christmas card. He even included a little poem, "I love your name, I love your voice," for a SH. "Sweetheart, you are my choice." The girl showed the card to her father. The next day, her father and 2 other men dragged Willie James from his home, took him to the Swanee River, tied him up, and forced his father to watch as they made him jump to his death. His only crime was stepping outside the boundaries of caste. Pillar number 4 is purity versus pollution. This is the obsession with keeping the dominant caste pure and avoiding contamination from the lower castes. This pillar creates a world of bizarre and cruel rules. In some parts of India, a Dalit had to stay a certain number of paces away from a Brahmin, lest his shadow pollute the high caste person. In Nazi Germany, Jews were banned from public swimming pools because it was believed their bodies would contaminate the water. In the United States, this obsession was everywhere. There were separate Bibles in Southern courtrooms, one for blacks and one for whites, so that hands of different castes wouldn't touch the same sacred object. Black people couldn't try on clothes in stores. In Florida, even the textbooks for black and white children couldn't be stored together in the same warehouse. Nowhere was this obsession clearer than with swimming pools. Wilkerson shares the story of Al Bright, the only black player on his Little League championship team in Ohio in 1951. The team went to a public pool to celebrate. But Al wasn't allowed in. After much debate, the lifeguards came up with a solution. First, every white person had to get out of the water. Then, they put Al in a small rubber raft. A lifeguard got in the water and pushed the raft for a single, agonizing lap around the pool, as his teammates watched from the sidelines. All the while, the lifeguard repeated one warning: just don't touch the water. Whatever you do, don't touch the water. His body could not be allowed to pollute the water his teammates had just been swimming in. The 5th pillar is occupational hierarchy. This is the idea that there is a mudsill for society, a group destined to do the menial, undesirable jobs so that others don't have to. Senator James Henry Hammond of South Carolina declared this on the Senate floor in 1858. In all social systems, he said, there must be a class to do the menial duties. It constitutes the very mudsill of society. For most of American history, African Americans were relegated to these jobs by law and custom: sharecroppers, servants, janitors. In the 1890s, 85% of black men worked in either agriculture or domestic service. Any sign of ambition above one's station was seen as a threat. Anything that causes the Negro to aspire above the plow handle, said a Mississippi governor, will be the worst thing on earth for the Negro. God Almighty designed him for a menial. This brings us to the 6th pillar, dehumanization and stigma. To keep a caste system going, you have to convince yourself that the people at the bottom aren't fully human. It's a programming, Wilkerson says, a war against what your own eyes can see and what your heart could feel. She draws stark parallels between the dehumanization of Jews in Nazi labor camps and enslaved people in the American South. Both were stripped of their names and given numbers or mocking nicknames. Both had their heads shaved. Both were fed barely enough to survive while being forced to do brutal labor. Both were subjected to gruesome medical experiments without consent or anesthesia, from the Nazi doctors at Auschwitz to drive. J. Marion Sims, the father of gynecology, who perfected his techniques by performing agonizing surgeries on enslaved women without anesthesia. Dehumanization makes atrocities seem reasonable. In the early 20th century, a popular carnival game was the coon dip, where white fairgoers paid to throw baseballs at the head of a live black man. This wasn't seen as monstrous, it was seen as entertainment. The seventh pillar is terror as enforcement. You cannot keep an entire group of people in an artificial, subordinate position without violence. Terror is not a bug in a caste system, it's a feature. It's a necessary tool for control. The whip was the most common instrument of punishment during slavery. But after slavery, the terror took on new forms. For decades, a black person was lynched every 3 or 4 days in America. These weren't secret murders. They were public spectacles, part carnival, part torture chamber. Thousands of people, including children, would gather to watch. Photographers would set up and sell postcards of the killings, which people would mail to their relatives. One person wrote on the back of a postcard from a lynching in Waco, Texas, "This is the barbecue we had last night. Your son Joe." Even the Nazis did not stoop to selling souvenirs of Auschwitz, Time magazine would later write. This pillar is about reminding the subordinate caste of the absolute power the dominant caste holds over them. As a white man in Mississippi told an anthropologist in the 1930s, when asked why black people were so polite, "They have to be." Finally, the eighth pillar is inherent superiority versus inherent inferiority. This is the daily, moment-to-moment reinforcement of the idea that one group is naturally smarter, better, and more deserving than the other. It's in the unspoken rules of etiquette: who has to step off the sidewalk, who gets called Mr., who has to enter through the back door. It's about controlling the symbols of status. For centuries, there were laws specifying the kinds of cheap, rough fabrics enslaved people were allowed to wear. They couldn't wear anything that might be seen as above their station. Even in the 1940s, black soldiers returning from World War II were attacked and killed for wearing their army uniforms, a symbol of status and citizenship the caste system could not tolerate. One of the most powerful examples of this is a story Wilkerson shares from a 1944 high school essay contest in Columbus, Ohio. The topic was what to do with Hitler after the war. A 16-year-old African-American girl won the contest with a single sentence: "Put him in a black skin and let him live the rest of his life in America." These 8 pillars, working together, create a powerful, self-reinforcing system. But what are the consequences of living inside this old, damaged house? Wilkerson shows how the tentacles of caste reach into every aspect of our lives, creating psychological burdens for everyone, not just those at the bottom. For those in the dominant caste, especially those on the lower rungs, there is a constant, gnawing anxiety. Social scientists call it dominant group status threat. For generations, working-class white Americans were given what W.E.B. Du Bois called a public and psychological wage. They might not have had wealth or power, but they had their whiteness. No matter how tough things got, they knew they would never be at the very bottom. But in recent decades, as society has slowly become more equal and demographics have shifted, that old guarantee has started to feel less certain. For some, Wilkerson suggests, equality feels like a demotion. The rise of others feels like a threat to their own identity. This has led to what economists Ann Case and Angus Deaton call deaths of despair, a shocking rise in suicide, drug overdoses, and alcoholism among middle-aged white Americans. They are, in a way, dying from the end of an illusion. For those in the subordinate caste, the pressure creates last-place anxiety. The system pits people against each other in what she calls a flooding basement. People start to rank themselves by their proximity to the dominant caste, lighter skin, straighter hair. Immigrants learn that a quick way to be accepted is to distance themselves from the people at the very bottom. It creates the crabs in a barrel phenomenon, where people pull each other down out of fear or envy, unwittingly doing the work of the caste system for it. And for everyone, the friction of caste is literally lethal. Wilkerson dives into the medical science. When we are exposed to chronic stress, the daily cuts of discrimination, the constant need for vigilance, our bodies release the stress hormone cortisol. Over time, this weathers our bodies. It shortens our telomeres, the protective caps on our chromosomes, which is a measure of premature aging. This isn't just a black problem. Scientists have found that harboring prejudice itself can be deadly. When people with high levels of unconscious bias interact with people from other groups, their own bodies perceive a threat. Their blood pressure rises, cortisol floods their system. Their own prejudice is making them sick. A caste system is a disease, and none of us is immune. The turning point in Wilkerson's modern narrative is the election of Barack Obama in 2008. It was the greatest departure from the script of the American caste system. But this change in the script did not heal the country's divisions, it exposed them. It triggered a massive backlash. A sense of dominant group status threat went into overdrive. The number of hate groups surged. A movement arose whose sole purpose was to prove that the first black president was not a citizen. As Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell declared, the Republican Party's single most important goal was to make Obama a one-term president. This backlash, this resurgence of caste, culminated in the election of 2016. Wilkerson argues that many observers were blindsided because they failed to see the powerful, predictable force of caste at work. Many working-class white voters, she says, were not voting against their economic interests. They were voting to protect what they saw as their most valuable interest, their position in the hierarchy. The symbols of this struggle are all around us. Wilkerson takes us to Charlottesville, where a rally to protect a statue of Robert E. Lee turned deadly. America, she points out, has more than 1,700 monuments to the Confederacy, a republic that went to war against the United States to preserve slavery. We honor the losers of that war, the leaders of a treasonous cause. She contrasts this with Germany. After World War II, Germany went through a painful process of reckoning. Today, it is a crime to display a swastika in Germany. There are no statues celebrating Nazi generals. Instead, their memorials are for the victims. Hitler's bunker, where he spent his final days, is now an unremarkable parking lot. Germany chose to confront its history, to learn from it, and to build memorials that say, "Never again." America, she suggests, has yet to truly reckon with its past. And we pay a steep price for it. Compared to other wealthy nations, the United States lags in almost every measure of well-being. We have the highest incarceration rate in the world. Our maternal mortality rate is the worst in the developed world. Our life expectancy is lower. Our students score near the bottom in math and reading. We rank 18th in happiness. A caste system, with its built-in rivalry and lack of empathy, prevents us from creating a society where everyone can thrive. The COVID-19 pandemic, she writes, was like an X-ray, exposing all the pre-existing conditions of our caste system, the inequalities that determined who could work from home and who had to risk their lives on the front lines, who got the best care and who died at disproportionate rates. It's a bleak picture. The old house is in rough shape. The foundation is cracked. So, is there any hope? This is where Wilkerson's work turns from diagnosis to prescription. The final section of her book is called Awakening, and it begins with a powerful story of personal transformation. It's the story of a Brahmin in India, a man born to the very highest caste. He was twice born, initiated into manhood with a sacred thread draped across his chest, a symbol of his purity and superiority. But over his life, he began to see the lie of caste. He saw the suffering of the Dalits, the lowest caste, and he recognized their humanity. He saw that the system had not only oppressed them but it also imprisoned him in a fake crown. One day, he told a Dalit friend, "I have ripped off my sacred thread. It was a poisonous snake around my neck." He had shed the symbol of his unearned privilege. He had chosen his own humanity over his rank. He had awakened. This, Wilkerson suggests, is the path forward for all of us. Not with a single law, not with one election, but with 1,000,000 individual moments of awakening. She calls for something she terms radical empathy. It's not just sympathy, which is feeling sorry for someone. It's not pity, which is looking down on someone. It's not even just putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Radical empathy, she writes, is putting in the work to understand another's experience from their perspective. It's listening with a humble heart. It's recognizing that the price of privilege is the moral duty to act when you see another person treated unfairly. It's seeing the person in front of you not as a role in a play, not as a costume, but as a complex, breathing human being, just like you. Every time a person reaches across caste and makes a real connection, it helps to break the back of the system. Wilkerson reminds us of Albert Einstein. When he fled Nazi Germany and came to America, he was shocked to find another caste system waiting for him. But he refused to play his assigned role. He refused to look down on African Americans to gain acceptance. When the great singer Marian Anderson was denied a hotel room in Princeton because of her race, Einstein invited her to stay in his home. He joined the NAACP. He spoke out against lynching. He used his immense privilege to stand with those at the bottom. He chose empathy. In the end, Wilkerson leaves us with a profound and simple truth. We did not create this old house. We are not personally responsible for what people who look like us did centuries ago. But we are responsible for what we do today. We are responsible for our own ignorance, or our own wisdom. We are responsible for either patching over the cracks and pretending they're not there, or getting to work on fixing the foundation. A world without caste, she writes, would set everyone free. It would be a world where we look at the breathtaking diversity of our species not as a hierarchy to be climbed, but with wonder and gratitude. It would be a world where we are finally free to be ourselves, not the roles we were cast to play. Commentary. As we close the pages on this summary of caste, I want to sit with you for a moment and reflect on what this all means. This isn't just an academic book, it's a mirror. And looking into it can be uncomfortable. It forces us to see the invisible structures we walk through every single day, the unspoken rules that shape our interactions, our opportunities, and even our own thoughts. The most powerful lesson I take from Isabel Wilkerson's work is that a caste system is a prison for everyone. It's easy to see how it harms those at the bottom, the people who bear the daily weight of stigma and exclusion. But Wilkerson masterfully shows us how it also traps those at the top. It burdens them with a false sense of superiority, a brittle identity that depends on having someone beneath them. It narrows their vision, limits their capacity for empathy, and ultimately, robs them of a fuller, richer connection to their own humanity. Nobody wins. The whole house suffers. So, what do we do? It's easy to feel overwhelmed by a system that's 400 years old. But Wilkerson doesn't leave us in despair. She offers us a path forward, rooted not in grand political gestures, but in small, personal acts of awakening. If there's one thing you take away from our conversation today, let it be this: You have the power to step out of the role you've been cast in. Here are a few simple ways to start, right now. First, just start to see. See the invisible. The next time you're watching a movie, notice who gets to be the hero. The next time you're in a meeting, notice who gets interrupted and whose ideas get ignored. The next time you read a news story about crime or poverty, ask yourself what story isn't being told. Wilkerson has given us the language, the 8 pillars, to identify the architecture of caste. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Second, practice that idea of radical empathy. It's more than just being nice. It's a discipline. It means choosing curiosity over judgment. It means when someone shares an experience of being slighted or disrespected, your first impulse isn't to question it or explain it away, but to listen. To simply say, "Tell me more. I want to understand." This simple act can begin to repair the cracks in our foundation. And finally, in your own small way, break the script. If you're someone who has benefited from being in a dominant caste, use that privilege to create space for others. When you see someone being demeaned or dismissed, don't be a silent bystander. Your voice has weight. If you're someone from a subordinated caste, find the courage to resist the box others have built for you. Your ambition, your success, your joy, these are acts of rebellion against the old script. We are all heirs to this old, creaky house. The foundation is flawed, the walls are bowed, and a storm is coming. We can't pretend the damage isn't there. But we can choose to be the generation that starts the repairs. We can choose to build a world where our worth isn't determined by the costume we wear, but by the content of our character and the compassion in our hearts. A world where everyone is finally free. That was a summary of Caste, The Origins of Our Discontents by Isabel Wilkerson. We've touched on the major themes and stories today, but I have to be honest with you. A summary is like looking at a photograph of the Grand Canyon. It can show you the colors and the scale, but it can never capture the feeling of standing on the edge, with the wind in your hair and the vastness of it all taking your breath away. The real magic of this book happens when you read it yourself. It's in the quiet moments, when a particular story or a simple phrase connects with your own life in a way you didn't expect. This summary is here to help you decide if this book is worth your time. If anything we've talked about has sparked something in you, I encourage you to pick up a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning. It's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see yourself and the world around you. Also, if you found this summary valuable, please take a moment to subscribe and maybe share it with someone you think it might resonate with. We're building a community here of people who believe in the power of great ideas to change our lives, and I'd be honored to have you on the journey with us as we explore another life-changing book. Let's keep growing together.